Hey everyone, welcome to the Wednesday game preview show. At this point, we do, of course, weekly rankings, try to get some of the start-sit stuff. Jake Latarsky and I did the waiver wire show yesterday. It was an unprecedented show for me. I've been doing that now 5+ years. And my recommendation was do not pick up anybody, at least on Tuesday or Wednesday. The reaction, or at least what you should be doing, is checking who gets cut, given we are entering Buymageddon Part 1 here in Week 12 with 6 teams on bye, 0 teams on bye Week 13, and then Buymageddon Part 2 Week 14, another 6 teams, including the Ravens and a few other massive ones. So this week will be critical from a fantasy perspective. Don't worry, though. Jim Coventry, he's got you covered on every facet. We're going through every one of these games as well, too, to help out folks who might be in a bit of a conundrum with a few of their start-sits. And we'll start first, Jim, with a Thursday night game that I was really excited for entering last week. And then we heard that hell might literally freeze over in Cleveland. The weather is supposed to be ridiculous. I don't think it's quite Bills Patriots level, where the Patriots chose literally not to pass at all the entire game. But 30-mile-per-hour winds, possible blizzard-related conditions at some point. And you already have two offenses, at least in the case of the Steelers, who aren't all that interested in scoring offense, and the Browns, who might not be capable of scoring a whole lot of production, at least in junk time. So Winston, ironically, Jameis Winston, the quarterback for the Browns, is somebody that might have had to stream this week. But given the quarterback deficiencies across the board, it's a tough spot to be. Weather's bad. You might still have to play him. Or are you saying he's like 32 of 32 quarterbacks this week for you?
It's a real problem because realistically, 89% chance of snow or rain. Now it's going to be 38 degrees. So as to what the snow is, if it's going to be 38, it's probably not going to pile up. So there's that. But here's the biggest problem, Joe. 25 to 35 mile per hour winds. That's not the gusts. The gusts are supposed to be higher. And so you look at Russell Wilson, what's his game? He does throw some balls to the flat, but he throws it downfield deep passes. He doesn't throw much in the middle. Those moon balls are gone. You're not throwing moon balls in this weather at all. And that's a big problem. Jameis, what does he like to do? Chuck it deep when he can. Probably not working here. So both of these teams, at their core, they want to run the ball. The Browns fall behind every week, so they can't. Well, this week they're probably not going to fall behind. Nobody's going to get way ahead of anybody in this game unless there's fumbles and craziness. So Nick Chubb got game scripted out last week. He hasn't been great, but they're going to have to lean on him and Jerome Ford. Now, the Steelers are a great run defense, so how far they get, that's a big question. Other side of the ball, kind of the same deal. The Browns are a good run defense. It's they have a lot of mistakes in their secondary. Well, their secondary probably won't hurt them here. And so I don't think these teams are going to move the ball well. I think the Steelers have a better run game. It's better put together. It's a better schemed up. Arthur Smith, of course, coaching that. So I think Najee Harris and Jalen Warren both do pretty well here. Nick Chubb hopefully gets you 50 yards, but I think that's about it. You're hoping he falls in the end zone if it works. But yeah, this game is not going to have much scoring, Joe.
Over under at 36.5. And I think both you and I are kind of leaning towards the under, given the weather conditions involved. I think you have to play, especially with 6 teams on bye. I think you have to play George Pickens, right? That seems fair.
You have to play him because of the buys. And here's what you're hoping for. You are hoping there's a 5-yard slant and he houses it.
Right.
That's really what you're hoping for. Because don't be surprised if George Pickens has 3 catches for 14 yards and that's it. That is squarely in the range of outcomes. And it's probably the most likely outcome. But again, they play a lot of man coverage. So if he slips one tackle, he could be gone.
The Cedric Tillmans of the world, and especially Elijah Moore. Tillman had been, at least over the past couple weeks, rostered and played to the point where I think he exceeds this level. But Elijah Moore has been a popular waiver wire candidate. Again, I'm not recommending picking up anybody. I was saying the reactionary part of things Thursday, Friday, whoever gets cut from Buymageddon in Part 1. I like, you might have to play Elijah Moore. You might have to play Cedric Tillman. The issue ends up being, I don't know if there's volume enough for either one of those guys, given the weather conditions that we seem to be entering here come Thursday.
Jerry Jeudy is a good short area receiver. He could get some wide receiver screens. He's a little bit shifty after the catch. Well, a lot shifty last week against the Saints. David Njoku is the king of tight end screens. So if you're stuck in a PPR league, David Njoku could get you 6 catches for 35 yards, which could be okay. And yeah, you're right with the receivers as to who gets it. I know Moore has been, getting a good target share, but I think Jeudy might be the one to get you 8 PPR points.
Disco Dave asks a fair question. I mean, Deontay Johnson's been completely phased out of the lineup. We're certainly concerned about Cedric Tillman. Would you play Deontay Johnson over Cedric Tillman given the weather concerns?
No, Deontay Johnson's not playing snaps.
Right.
And I don't have
Yeah.
it with me right now. I'm going to try to look at while we're talking. I don't think he's played more than 15% of the snaps, and he's not being integrated in. So it's a real problem. So, and Matt, I look at right now, Deontay Johnson, 18% of the snaps last week, 8%. Yeah, so he's not playing. He had 2 targets in each game, but they were both short, and he has 1 catch for 6 yards. So, no, you play Tillman because, again, just like George Pickens, he's nothing like George Pickens. But the Steelers and the Browns defense are going to have to pack it all up because it's all going to be the run game. So Tillman's that guy. If he catches a quick hitch, he could take it and go a long way with it. So I think there's that. But Deontay Johnson is not a part of the offense right now.
All right, let's transition over to the Chiefs and Panthers. Of course, the Chiefs finally lost to the Bills last week, which you called correctly. It doesn't matter, though. It's the regular season. The Bills have won 4 straight regular season games against the Chiefs. It's the postseason. That really matters. Let's just say I think the Chiefs will get off the schneid this week against the Panthers. In Carolina, Chiefs favored by 11 points, over-under at 43. It's possible that the Panthers might cover the spread. I'm not sure if I really want to pick any direction on that per se. But I think the Chiefs are going to get going now. The real question will be, does Isaiah Pacheco play this week? I would think, especially given the opposition, you would choose to play Pacheco as late as you can, which would be, given the 21-day activation window, next week. That isn't what we're getting reported, at least right now. And maybe it's a scenario where the Chiefs work Pacheco back into the lineup with Kareem Hunt. Again, they're double-digit favorites against a Panthers team that's been pretty miserable most of the season. Is there any read that you have in Pacheco, Kareem Hunt, or is there any situation where, again, given 6 teams on bye, you could actually play both Kareem Hunt and Pacheco, provided Pacheco is activated?
Yeah, you framed that really well, Joe. Pacheco's expected back this week. I am expecting him to play about half of his normal time. That's about it. And I think Hunt plays the other half. And I think as the weeks go on, you see the ratio split. I think by week 14 or 15, it's 75% Pacheco, it's 25% Hunt as a change of pace, and that's it. But right now, yes. And in this game, if the Chiefs, they're 10.5 point favorites. If the Chiefs get a halftime lead of 17 plus points, I think you might not see Pacheco in the second half. So it could be the plan 50-50, but I think it could end up Pacheco playing 35%.
Yeah.
And if it's a blowout win, preserve him, get him his sea legs, get him, ready, and then put Hunt in. I think you can play both this week. And I think even in limited action, Pacheco can get something done for you. But yes, they're going to run the ball. The Panthers cannot stop the run. They can't load the box with extra bodies because Patrick Mahomes is the quarterback. And if they do that, that would just be, totally just blowing your whole team away because Mahomes will crush you if you load the box. So they have to let the Chiefs win on the ground. It's the best way to do it. And so, yeah, I think this is one of those games. It's such a mismatch. And the Chiefs, after a loss, are probably not likely to have a letdown game here.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, and the Panthers, here's the problem with them coming back. Bryce Young's their quarterback. And look, some teams do go to sleep, like Denver went to sleep on them in the second half, and Coker got a late touchdown. That's nice. But, man, Spagnuolo's going to probably have some confusing looks in the secondary, and they probably don't stop using those. And that's a real bad one for Bryce Young. I guess Jatavian Sanders, if you had to play with the 6 teams on bye, he's been hot. The Chiefs give you the middle of the field. If Adam Thielen plays.
Yeah, that was the other question I was going to ask. Yeah, he's going to be likely activated this week.
And the thought is yes. And if he is, they give you the middle of the field. And so those 2 players for PPR, Sanders could get you 7 to 9 points. Adam Thielen could get you 6 to 10.
It's a narrative-driven thing, but I mentioned this on the SiriusXM show spot that I did with Nick, Will, and Jeff yesterday, Channel 87. I think if you're the Panthers, and this is completely narrative-driven, if you're the Panthers, your season's gone to crap once again. What sounds better? What is the better move for next season? Our 30-plus-year-old receiver, Adam Thielen, likely entering free agency this year, getting him more targets, or the undrafted free agent from Holy Cross becoming more of a factor and being a 53-man roster candidate next year? I think it's that part, and I wouldn't be surprised if Jalen Coker becomes more involved, even with Thielen back at some point. But and Jeff had mentioned this on the show, and I think it's fair. The ultimate key piece is, do we have something with Bryce Young? And Adam Thielen probably helps Bryce Young, or at least the development of Bryce Young more so. So it's tough. I actually mentioned Jalen Coker on the Waiver Wire show yesterday as a guy that I wouldn't mind if Jalen Coker or Elijah Moore, for example. Again, talking about the conditions on Thursday, which one would you rather have, Jim?
Here's your big issue that nobody's really talking about. Coker 6'3", 208, but he plays slot for them. What does Adam Thielen play? Slot.
That's where I'm going with. I wouldn't be
Right.
surprised if Coker pushes that Thielen out.
Right. And exactly. And who are they paying? Thielen. So you're right. You're right. Coker is tough one to add because even down the stretch, he had a nice little run, but fantasy managers have been counting on him. Bryce Young's not good throwing to the outside. Legat's got a little bit done. I'll give him that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, there's not a big passing pie here. So I'm very, very worried, like you are, that Coker right now, the little bit he's been getting, that might go away quick.
Yeah, I still think by the end of the season, Coker is more involved than Thielen because, again, there's no incentive for the Panthers to develop Thielen in the way that they would with Coker. But you're trying to develop Bryce Young first, and Thielen probably helps that more. It's a tough conundrum. I'm not sure it gets solved this week again. The only consolation that I have for fantasy managers is that every single person likely is dealing with 6 teams on bye. So they're, no matter what, 12-team, 10-team leagues, I would assume every single person will be like, man, I wish I wouldn't have to play X player. And if that's Elijah Moore, if that's Jalen Coker, if that's Adam Thielen, every single person seems to be kind of in that same spot for this week. Thanks, NFL, by the way, for doing this stupid scheduling where we have 6 teams on bye over the next 3 weeks. All right, let's move over to a NFC North battle between the Vikings and Bears. Right now, this one is in Chicago. I mean, it'll for certainly be in Chicago, but right now the Vikings are favored by 3.5. Over under 39.5. You saw the Bears, thankfully, as a Packer fan, lose on a last-second blocked field goal to the Packers. The Vikings, I thought, did what they were supposed to do against the Titans. They are not the Lions. They're not going to molly-whip a team by 50-plus points. They beat a bad team, and they beat them pretty soundly, in my mind. Is this a trap game of sorts for the Vikings, or are we going to finally start seeing them fall back to earth? Because we're talking now a month plus where Sam Darnold has not looked nearly as confident or electric as he did early this season.
You know, Joe, the important thing this time of year is we have a ton of divisional games. I don't think there's such a thing as a trap game in a divisional game. I think these teams know each other. They all hate each other. They all hate seeing each other twice a year. I think they get up for every one of these divisional battles. So, yeah, I think that's going to be a very important way to craft these games when they're divisional battles. Even Browns Steelers. Now, the weather's an issue, but they're coming out, and you saw the Browns beat the Ravens a few weeks back, right? So yeah, everything's off the table. These games are hard to bet too. But here with the Vikings right now, look, Aaron Jones has gotten dinged up a little bit. He is not running at the level he ran at. Like you said, Darnold, you point out very well. Darnold's not playing at his level. The Bears are tough to pass on, and the Bears have enough of a pass rush. Now the Vikings offensive line is good, so that kind of mitigates that. But the Bears, they give it up on the ground. And you saw Green Bay early commit to that run, and they had a lot of success. And then they kind of lost their way, and they were pretty disjointed. But I think the Packers, if Jones gets going here, I think that's the key to the matchup for them. But the Bears on the other side, last week, Thomas Moore took over the offense. And what I liked was you could run on the Packers. That's what they played last week. Well, they ran on the Packers. They ran with Swift. The blocking was really good on the long touchdown. Roschon Johnson got involved. Well, Minnesota's different. You can't run on Minnesota. And now they got to pass. And those confusing looks that have been a problem for Caleb Williams all year, this is the most confusing set of looks he's going to see from any of these teams. Unless Caleb Williams is able to get the ball out super fast like he did last week, the Bears are going to have a struggle to score. DJ Moore has to get fed again like he did last week.
And I don't think the read option plays, which were just destroying the Packers as they have for the decade plus now, they won't be there against competent teams. And also the playbook is out on that a little bit more. Now, you have a week of film. You saw Caleb Williams make a lot of those runs. For the first half, whatever the reason, the Packers did not make in-game adjustments to put a spy on Caleb Williams. So there was always that possibility too. And if the coaching decision is, hey, Caleb, if your first or second read is not there, run, you can take some of the decision making away that might be an error or might play into Brian Flores' defense's favor if Caleb Williams does run, but that can be adjusted too, like we saw in the second half of the Packer game. And I would imagine here with the Vikings, a much more well-coached defense. They have guys that fit their roles a little bit better. I think the Vikings defense will just contain Caleb Williams, unlike what the Packers did last week, and that'll be more of a mirage from Caleb Williams. Divisional games, you already know what the personnel is for the most part, so it's more about stopping the tendencies that you saw week to week, month to month. That to me feels like the Vikings saw what the Bears' best punch will be last week and should be able to adjust for it.
Yeah, I predicted 17-13 on this game. Divisional game. Bears probably nose out a touchdown one way or other, maybe get a good defensive play to keep them in scoring position at one time. But like you said, I don't think they're consistently moving the ball here. The Vikings have enough against a good defense. It's a road game. The Bears are at home, so that gives the Bears a little advantage. They do tend to play a little more spirit on their home field. But again, the Vikings should come through in a lower scoring game. Justin Jefferson does the usual. He's been getting like 80 yards in most games. He keeps that up. Addison probably doesn't do a lot against those outside corners here. Hawkinson's playing about 45% of the snaps, up and down with targets. Probably just a middling game for him. But Aaron Jones is the one that, if he can snap that funk he's been in, he does have the bandwidth to have a good game. DeAndre Swift, he's a floor play only. I don't see a big ceiling here. Outside of that, this is not a Romo Dunze game. I don't think with those confusing looks, getting the ball downfield is going to happen, and they've been using him a little more downfield. I think DJ Moore and all those design screens, I think he's the one that could get you a PPR special, but not a high ceiling. It's just a high floor.
That's fair enough. I mean, it's low scoring game for a reason. NFC North games with the weather that could possibly be involved. It's just cold. I mean, in Chicago, a little bit windy city for a reason. So we'll have to see. I see a lot of questions in the chat pertaining to trades and should you accept this? Should you accept that? And also some season long rankings, weekly rankings. Jim has you covered every Sunday morning at 11 a.m. Central, getting you set on those start-sit questions. You can also ask Jim Coventry NFL on Twitter about said trades. I know Jim does a great job answering as many user questions as you can, so we'll direct those there in the chat. If you have trade-related questions, at Jim Coventry, Coventry NFL on Twitter. All right, let's move over to the Titans and Texans game. This one's in Houston, another divisional matchup. Titans have certainly lost most of their teeth, if not all of their teeth, as the season has wore on. Texans fared by 8.5. I think the Titans are the worst team in the league. I know Jacksonville is the number one overall team right now, and you have both New York teams trying to fight for who's the worst, yada, yada. The Titans just have no idea what they're doing, and Will Levis is their quarterback. Is there any way in which they cover? I don't even think they're going to win. Can they cover the 8.5-point spread?
Again, divisional matchup. I think they do, because
Wow.
and that's Joe. And Joe, none of it makes sense, because none of it ever makes sense. You put these teams out there, they know each other. Look, the Titans, they have a good enough defense. They don't have a great pass rush, but I'm telling you, that offensive line is a real problem for the Texans. And they're going to get after Stroud, and Stroud's not playing the same. I'm not going to harp on the same thing week after week. Their offense is way different this year. It's not suited to his strengths. And Nico Collins is back. And yes, Nico Collins could break this game. And if Collins gets two big plays, then they cover. Then they definitely cover. And he can do that. It certainly could happen. Joe Mixon, this is not the best matchup for Mixon. Unlike Dallas, that's a sieve against the run. The Titans are solid against the run. They will give them some traction, and they will kind of slow Mixon down a little bit. Mixon should win the war of attrition. I think the Texans win 19-13, but again, it's just C.J. Stroud under pressure this year, and teams know on an obvious passing down, you get after him, and Laramie Tunsil's playing terrible at left tackle. Now, the other side of the ball, I don't know how the Titans are going to get their points, but Tony Pollard, usually, the last couple of weeks, he's been a little down. I think he was overworked for a while. They've kind of eased off of him. But he has been a very good running back this year. And you can get runs against the Texans. They are not a lights-out run defense. So I do think Tony Pollard can get a big play or two to keep him going. And somehow Nick Westbrook-Akine scored 5 touchdowns in 6 games. Now, last week, Minnesota, they send a jailbreak blitz when the Titans are on their own 2-yard line. And then they put single coverage, and then the corner busted, and there was a 98-yard touchdown. That one, but, throw that one out. I mean, in terms of doing it again. But somehow the Titans get some way to score a touchdown. Again, I see it 19-13. Pollard, I would play. Ridley, I think Ridley is in a decent spot here. When he sees, the corner for the Texans, I don't know why I'm bonking on this. He did well.
Stingley.
Yeah, Derek Stingley Jr.
Yep.
And so Stingley, he's going to give Ridley some trouble, but he won't be on him every play. So I do think Ridley gets a little bit done here. So that's about it in terms of players we're going with. Tank Dell, right now, he's just a floor play.
Yeah, and again, 6 teams on bye. Like, you'd rather play Tank Dell than most of those, the Quentin Johnstons and Elijah Moores of the world. Yes. But that's sort of where you're at, and I don't think that really changes. I had made the case on the back end of the Tuesday Waiver Wire podcast. Week 12 teams and Week 14 teams, I would be willing to trade a bunch of the Week 14 teams players, and in this case, the Texans have a Week 14 bye. You might be able to trade Tank Dell to somebody who needs Tank Dell for the next 2 weeks, but rest of season, it would help you more to get rid of a guy like Tank Dell, and you might be able to get a bit more value out of that. There's a bunch of those situations, again, with the week 12 buys, week 14 buys. We have to be reactive to the way the NFL gave us this dumb schedule making, again, with 6 teams on bye, both week 12, week 14. And I think that's one of the ways, again, making trades with likely the trade deadline for a lot of folks coming in this week. All right, let's move over to the Lions, Colts. Lions, once again, curb stomped another bad team, another AFC South team. Lo and behold, Lions are facing another AFC South team, but at least this one is a bit more competent, maybe. I mean, Anthony Richardson, credit to him. I was a little bit worried sitting out 2 games coming back. Does that really change his demeanor? Does it change his play? It at least did this week. Anthony Richardson looked fantastic. That felt like the 2-game stretch last year of Anthony Richardson as a premium quarterback asset. There were still certainly question marks, frustrating parts of his game, as there will likely be as Richardson continues to develop. But that was a fantastic sign for the Colts, who've been mired in this just bad vibes, decision-making, whatever you want to call it right now. It's been difficult. Lions are just fantastic. Fair by 7.5. This is in Indy. I don't really see a way in which the Lions don't end up curb stomping the Colts again or another team again. I just think the Lions are on a complete roll, and they're not really facing actual teams that can put up a fight. Do you think this game is closer than what I might be indicating at?
Not really, Joe. The thing is, defensively, the Colts are good. They're not great. They're not bad at it. They're good at everything. They're good at getting some pressure. They're good against the run. They're good against the pass. But here's the problem. If they're playing the Lions, it starts at that offensive line. When you're just good, that Lions offensive line can completely overwhelm you, and that's where everything starts. The run game starts, then they pass off of that. And last week, look, Jared Goff doesn't normally throw 29 attempts in a game they blow out win. I believe after the 5 interception game against Houston, I believe that it was a get his confidence back thing. And they got his confidence back with 400 yards and with 4 touchdowns. So, look, the Colts just do not have the bodies to deal with the Lions offense. So the Lions will move. Now, the other side of the ball, here's the interesting thing for fantasy. Now, last week, Shane Steichen drew up a real nice game plan for Anthony Richardson. Now, the Jets defensively, they just honed in to stop the run. They put bodies in. They were willing to give him the pass. Steichen simplified the game, gave Richardson some easy throws, some easy slot throws, didn't make him go, too difficult on anything, ran him 10 times. There's only 32 yards, but 2 touchdowns in there. Here's what's going to happen in this game. This is the wrinkle. The Lions play one of the highest rates of man-to-man coverage in the league. What that means is on a pass route, unlike zone, where the eyes are on the quarterback and everywhere else, when you're playing man, your eyes are away from the quarterback. Those are the games where a quarterback can take off and run because corners they don't see you. And so they can build that. Steichen will build into the game plan. And also the Lions like to scheme up a lot of pressure. Not that it always gets home, but they do send pressure pack. Like I said, pressure's actually been very good, even when Hutchinson's been gone. But when Richardson sees that, he could break a lot of this. Like if a safety's blitzing, he'll just shed the safety. So I think Richardson could run for 60, 70 yards here. For fantasy, I'm playing Richardson this week as a floor play he has a decent floor for running, but I do think, and when they're trailing, I think it could be a big enough game on the ground where he has ceiling too.
So let's play this out a bit more because that's fantastic. I hadn't thought about that with Richardson and the rushing aspect. I don't know what the over-under would be. I'd imagine in somewhere around the 50 to 55 if you're doing the DFS options or the sports betting prop bet side of things for Richardson. Richardson was dropped in quite a few leagues a couple weeks ago. Would you play Richardson over, let's just say, Geno Smith against the Cardinals this week? There might be weather involved in Seattle, but the Cardinals defense, not all that good. Like Geno Smith or Anthony Richardson?
Geno's interesting, and I know we'll cover that game later. So we'll talk about Geno and the specifics there. I don't need to break him down now, but I will play Richardson in that one because I think with the running, and that's back, 10 carries, like with that, his floor is way higher.
Okay, and then Bo Nix, against the Raiders. That's probably another one that you'd be considering Richardson along the same vein.
I think Nix has a safer floor than Richardson. I think Richardson has more upside in that game because I don't know that Denver is going to have to chase points late at all.
That's where I'm at too. I was kind of wondering if Richardson is a sneaky top 8 play-ish this week, given the yardage floor that you'd imagine from a rushing perspective. It is a gamble, though. It is absolutely a gamble because if there's a stinky game, it becomes real stinky for Anthony Richardson, and you'd assume that given how good the Lions are, there would be more likely a stinky game from Richardson. We'll have to see him very fast. And you're playing all your studs for the Lions. I guess the question to me becomes, knowing we believe Richardson's going to have an opportunity to run the ball, Pittman, Josh Downs, Alec Pierce, all three are, I think, flex options most weeks. And with 6 teams on bye, they might elevate above that. Is there any one of those that you're saying, no, I don't want to play given the bye week constraints that we have this week?
And Joe, I missed the beginning of that question. For you mean skill position players for
the lines, you're playing everyone that you normally play. I'm saying for the Colts, Michael
you
Pittman,
always play Josh
Downs.
Obviously, you always play him. Yep. Josh Downs is a superstar. Look, Pittman last week, we kind of saw it. The schemed up passes were nice, 5 for 40, but Pittman's not a ceiling play in this offense. So Pittman is PPR. You should get close to 10 points. So you should be good with that. I don't think you play anybody else. Obviously, Jonathan Taylor should be fine. Jonathan Taylor gets heavy volume, so that'll be fine. But yeah, other than that, there are no ancillary players on this team. Adonai Mitchell, who doesn't play many snaps, he had 2 big plays last week. Alec Pierce, Alec Pierce is interesting. We said earlier they play all that man. Yeah. Because of that allows Pierce to get over the top. So I think Pierce has a very good chance. Probably a 55% chance of hitting a long pass in this one, a long connection.
And that's all it would take. We saw Westbrook Akine become a top 30, top 25 fantasy receiver off of one broken play. If it's an Alec Pierce 50-yard touchdown or 50-yard reception, a full-point PPR league, that's 6 points if he doesn't score a touchdown. And it obviously comes more on even more receptions. I like the boom-bust mentality from the Colts offense. And in a week in which, again, I believe every single fantasy manager is struggling to some extent, fielding a roster or having the completely competitive one, having guys that have the boom potential, have those ceiling potential, makes way more sense than I would normally recommend in other situations. And I'm always a floor guy, but I think the ceiling plays are kind of interesting. Let's turn to the Patriots-Dolphins game. This one's in Miami. Dolphins fair by 7 points. Drake May, I think, is very clearly a streaming candidate for tight ends, for quarterbacks. It's tough because we just talked about Anthony Richardson. I just mentioned Geno Smith. There's Matthew Stafford. There's Bo Nix. I like all those guys a lot more than Drake May, but he's been producing despite the Patriots having 0 weapons. So what's your thoughts overall on this Patriots offense and what you can expect from Drake May?
So Drake May's going to run here. He's going to need to run here. It's a divisional game. So again, this could go any one of a number of ways, more than usual games. But the Dolphins at home against this Patriots defense, and they're bad against the run. And Miami is a good running team. And I think that said, I think that the Dolphins get out to a lead here. That's good for Drake May. When Drake May's trailing, he'll run. I think he has at least 24 yards in every game, but he's got a couple in the 40s. I think he runs well in this game. I don't trust any of the receivers. Demario Douglas even has a tougher matchup. Kader Kohu, the slot corner, has been healthy, and that's not an easier matchup. Hunter Henry should be fine here. Hunter Henry it's always a problem that Austin Hooper is seeing some targets, but Henry's only had 1 bad game in the last 5. Dolphins are bottom 3rd against tight ends. So Hunter Henry, somebody you can count on. Look, Ramondre Stevenson, he gets volume. But if he doesn't find the end zone, he could get pretty ugly. It's just they get bad game script. They don't throw him a ton. So there's that.
From the Dolphins side of things, Jalen Waddle has been arguably the biggest disappointment among non-injured players. The theme of the show, 6 teams on bye. You probably have to play Jalen Waddle, or are you to the point where you're comfortable in, let's say, 12-team league, just benching him for whatever you could find in the waivers?
I mean, we're at the point. He has a 15% chance of scoring a touchdown, which is literally tiny. So you're not really 4 for 40. You're looking at 4 for 40. And it could be a little less. It might be a tick more, but it's 4 for 40. So I guess the litmus test is if you can live with 8 PPR points, you're fine. Not what you drafted him for.
Right.
But that's like 6 weeks, 6 teams off. It's a definite flex.
Yeah, right. It's just a frustrating one given his draft pedigree or where you were drafting him under the season. The other question me, Jonnu Smith, I would imagine from the Dolphins offense, monster game last week. He seems to have been, I think we can comfortably say Jonnu Smith is in that Tucker Kraft territory, Pat Freiermuth territory of tight ends where you're totally fine playing him if you have to. But does he now elevate to another level where he is a must play given his role over the past 3 or 4 weeks?
As we know, all tight ends will eventually disappoint you. Other if their name isn't Kelsey. Well, Kelsey last week disappointed you, 2 for 4 last week. So tight ends will always disappoint you. But Jonnu Smith's targets 8, 4, 6, 6, 7, 8. That's the last 5 or 6 games. The only bad game he had a 4 for 20 in week 8. You'll take 6 PPR points. He has 2 monster games in there. Here's the thing. Defenses have to worry about the speed of Hill and Waddle. It's left the middle of the field open. And that's why Jonnu Smith is seeing the work he's seeing. And his coach isn't dumb. All right, well, get him the ball out in space because he's an athlete. So, yeah, Jonnu Smith right now, probably top 6 or 7 tight end the rest of the way. You play him over Evan Ingram with Mac Jones. And this week he's off, of course.
Right,
but I mean, going forward, yeah, you play him because Jonnu Smith has an equal floor to Ingram, but he has way more upside.
Yeah, it's true. I'll give you a joke here, Jim. The only scenario in which a tight end would be disappointing is in fantasy football. Everywhere else in life, we're all good with those sorts of things. All right, let's go ahead and move over to the next game, Buccaneers Giants. I had to throw it in there. You set me up too well, Jim.
I did.
This one's in New York. We have the debut of Tommy DeVito this season. Naturally, the Bucs are favored by 5.5. I talked about at the beginning of the show. I might legitimately consider, in the league in which we're desperately needing quarterbacks, playing Tommy DeVito over Jameis Winston against the Steelers defense in the blizzard-like conditions that could be occurring Thursday. I by no means think Tommy DeVito is good. In fact, it seems like the Giants and the players also think Tommy DeVito is not good. It's a joke to me that they're not playing Drew Lock instead, but here we are. So Tommy DeVito, can Wan'Dale Robinson and Malik Neighbors both sustain their fantasy value when we're talking about a top 50 quarterback in the league throwing them the ball?
So Tommy DeVito, we saw him last year, and obviously we weren't very encouraged. But remember, they had one of the worst offensive lines I have ever seen in my life last year. It was a 5-man across the board disaster. They didn't have receivers, but Wan'Dale Robinson was actually doing well from week 14 on with DeVito. Now Tyrod Taylor played in there a little bit too, so there's that. But this is a completely different team. They're not good, but their offensive line is way better. They're like in that just below average range. That's better. Malik Neighbors, he has a receiver. So I don't think Tommy DeVito is going to be great, but I think against a Buccaneers team that can't cover the pass, now they're going to blitz a lot. That could be a problem, but I think a lot of quick passes. And so I think you could go PPR. Neighbors going to be fine PPR. Neighbors going to catch 6 or 7 passes. Wan'Dale's going to catch 4 to 7 passes. They may not be for a lot of yardage. Neighbors could break something, though, because that secondary is so bad. And the Buccaneers probably score points here. So, yeah, I think DeVito in the 6 weeks behind, like you said, some players in bad situations. Look, I think he's going to run some, too. He's going to run for 30 yards here.
Yeah.
So if you're desperate, yeah, you can play him.
All right, so I'll play this scenario out to you. Would you play Tommy DeVito against this Buccaneers defense, which has allowed passing production to just about everyone? Or would you play Cooper Rush against the Commanders defense? Cooper Rush, of course, threw for over 300 yards last week, looked a lot better in his second game of the season. That's the level of quarterbacks that I'm having to deal with, Jim, this week, given I don't want to play Winston on Thursday.
Yeah, I'm playing Tommy DeVito, and I'm not blinking because Cooper Rush, look, the Texans did not really, you could tell they were disinterested. The Commanders are playing them. Dan Quinn used to coach that team. Dan Quinn is probably looking. Mm-hmm. Dan Quinn's been cooking up some real game plans defensively. Cooper Rush doesn't have a line. They don't have a line, and they got 2 or 3 people injured last week. Dan Quinn is going to look to strike his old team.
We always look for revenge. We always look for revenge games for players, revenge game for a coach. I love it. We'll get to the Commanders-Cowboys game a bit more, but I want to stick to the Giants-Buccaneers for a second.
That's right.
We expect Mike Evans is going to make his return this week. That was what he had been announcing or alluding to at least the past couple of weeks before their bye. There is that possibility that Mike Evans, motivated to continue his 1,000-yard receiving stretch, might play even better. The Buccaneers could be motivated to do that. Right now, at least earlier this week, I guess I haven't checked the odds now recently, the Bucs were plus 400 to win the NFC South. They are 2 games back and have the 2-game disadvantage of the Falcons. So they're effectively 3 games back from the division. You look at the schedule, though, this game included, the Buccaneers should be favored by touchdown favorites or more in 5 of the remaining 6 games. Falcons probably 3-3 among that group. Is it possible that you would say Buccaneers are actually going to win the NFC South despite losing to the Falcons twice this season?
I certainly don't like the current status of being down 2.5 games with not a whole lot left. But I don't just look. You blow one game, like you have one of those brain fart games, and
Correct.
all of a sudden you're done. But on paper, yes. On paper, yes. The Buccaneers do have a chance of doing this. And they made the playoffs last year, so at least they have that confidence of knowing they're a playoff type team. And coming out the bye, and I look, Baker Mayfield's gotten a lot of those Liam Cohen offense, even without Godwin and Evans, they were moving the ball well. Defense is a problem, but this is an easier matchup for them. So yeah, I think Mike Evans gets going here. We'll assume he's 100%. If he's playing, assume he's 100%. They don't have the luxury of easing him in if he's not ready, so they're going to use him. So I think the Buccaneers are Cade Otton. This is a tough matchup for Cade Otton. Giants allow the second fewest tight end fantasy points. Not the best matchup for him. And Rachaad White, though, great matchup for Rachaad White, Bucky Irving. Every week, the Giants get worse against the run, it looks like. So they're going to run. Evans is going to get his, and Baker Mayfield should be fine here. They're going to score some points.
I have two questions yet pertaining to this game, and I want to make sure we keep moving through. I have a buddy that has been talking ad nauseum about Bucky Irving and his fantasy playoff scenario where, again, he's going against a bunch of teams where the Buccaneers should smash. I keep telling my buddy, hey, there's still Rachaad White in the scenario in which the Buccaneers also are destroying a team. Sean Tucker becomes involved a little bit more. We always get asked this, you and I as experts, who are we trading for with the fantasy trade deadline or whatever else? Is Bucky Irving a name that you'd be considering given that Buccaneers schedule to end the rest of the season?
Look, Bucky Irving gets 10 to 16 touches every single week. This goes back to week 5 or earlier. He is a big part of that. His snap share is lower. His snap share is like 35, 40%, but he gets the ball when he's on the field. He's productive as a receiver, as a runner. The run blocking is so much better for Tampa than it was last year. He is a factor at the goal line. This team is going to score points. They move the ball, and like I said, the schedule is easy. Yes, Bucky Irving's a player. I have him in White every week. I put them right next to each other in their rankings. They're the same fantasy production. They're the same. They're different ways of getting there. They're the same.
Rest of season, Bucky Irving or Aaron Jones, for example.
Aaron Jones is getting usually 18 plus touches a week. And again, we're going to assume he's going to get healthier and he's battling through something. So we're going to go with the volume.
So that's where I go like that tier. Because I think Aaron Jones, James Conner, maybe even like Najee Harris, like that kind of tier of running back, I would rather have over Bucky Irving.
Yes.
But it is one of those that I would talk to the fantasy manager who has Bucky Irving and be like, hey, can I acquire X player? And then if you want to toss them Bucky Irving, one of those things where you don't allude that you're actually looking to get Bucky Irving, that could be a scenario in which that works out best for you. One person in the chat asked about Theo Johnson. I think it's a fair question. Again, 6 teams on bye. Example, Jatavian Sanders against the Chiefs, or Theo Johnson here against the Buccaneers. We're talking about scrubby top or like 16 and later tight ends. Is Theo Johnson a play with Tommy DeVito now too?
We don't know what Tommy DeVito's chemistry is with Theo Johnson. We know he has chemistry with Wan'Dale Robinson. Those are both middle of the field players. They're kind of competing for some of the same targets. Now the Buccaneers allow the 5th most fantasy points to tight ends. So look, if you're desperate, it's a dart throw. It's a dart throw. You could get 1 for 4, but you also could get 4 for 35. And that would be enough in a week with 6 teams on bye. So there obviously is a super, super low floor. But if there is a matchup, you're going to use Theo Johnson. In theory, this is the matchup.
All right, let's go to the Commanders. Cowboys. Commanders favored by 10, over under at 45. We already alluded to it a little bit. Dan Quinn in a revenge game scenario for the coach. I don't think there really is much conversation about the Cowboys offense. You're playing CeeDee Lamb, and I think effectively nobody else. Is that a fair statement? Like Jalen Tolbert, Jake Ferguson's, maybe Luke Schoonmaker. Again, if we're talking about Theo Johnson's the world, Luke Schoonmaker likely filling in for Jake Ferguson if he does not come back from concussion. It's bleak from the Cowboys offensive side of things. So from the Commanders, we just watched Joe Mixon run for 1 billion yards and 1 billion touchdowns. Is this Brian Robinson and Austin Eckler both in a top 20 fantasy running back scenario this week?
I think so. Because like I said with the Philly game last week, I liked Eckler because Philly would bring pressure and Eckler would see the dump offs, and he did. And that'll be the same when Micah Parsons gets going. Well, you're going to dump the ball off to Eckler and you're going to mitigate the pass rush. And you can run all day on Dallas. And Robinson, hopefully at a hamstring, is all the way back. Now we know he's been battling through knee and hamstring injuries, but he's got to be a little bit healthier now. And that's their mode of operation. They want to run the football. And Dallas can't stop the run. And so there's that. And they put extra tight ends on the field when they need to. They scheme up the run well. Yeah, both of them are very, very startable this week.
All right. Anything else you want to talk about this matchup before we move on?
Terry McLaurin has done very little in the last couple games. This might be the game, though, you can count on him to get something done. But be careful, Terry McLaurin, the rest of the schedule. It's Cliff Kingsbury coaches this offense. He used to coach Arizona. He was very predictable there. We're seeing now teams are seeing the tape. He's doing the same things week after week. That offense has been very easy to figure out now. You hem Daniels in the pocket. You basically put somebody over the top of McLaurin and you give them the flat passes and the run. And that's not going to be enough to win NFL games. But this week they should be fine. Terry McLaurin is a good player to trade right now because they're facing tougher defense down the schedule, and Cliff Kingsbury is proven. Remember all those second half fades in Arizona? That was all Kingsbury. It wasn't Kyler Murray. We all thought Kyler Murray was a second half bust. It was Cliff Kingsbury.
Yep. Week 14, bye week for the Commanders. We talked about on the Tuesday Wave Wire show. Jaden Daniels, also I mentioned as a candidate that I would trade away too, along the same lines with Cliff Kingsbury, the offense struggling. Terry McLaurin is a perfect example too. Someone to look around. Again, anywhere you listen to podcasts, RotoWire Fantasy Football, the Tuesday Wave Wire show, around the 40-minute mark, we talk about the week 14 guys that we trade away. It's ironic that you and I had this conversation now today. And then, of course, Jake and I had that conversation Tuesday because it seems to be the smart people have it on their minds, Jim, as to what to do with a few of these options. Let's turn to the Broncos Raiders. This one in Las Vegas. Broncos favored by 5.5, over under at 41. Yeah, the return of Javonte Williams, much to the chagrin of me, who was pushing Audric Estime as one of the only fantasy running backs you could pick up over the past month. Woohoo! No, wrong. Javonte Williams might have been dropped. I think you could probably consider him as well, too, in that scenario. Evidently, the Audric Estime thing was just to motivate Javonte Williams. Let me remind you again, Jim. I hate Sean Payton. I was going to say other words on YouTube. I cannot. I hate Sean Payton. He really pisses me off. This stuff is super annoying to deal with. Thankfully, it's a Raiders team that is equally annoying, equally frustrating. Jacoby Myers, you're maybe considering in this matchup, even though the Broncos secondary is fantastic. Otherwise, not really going there. Our top waiver wire pickup on the show yesterday, though, was Amir Abdullah, with the idea that the Raiders will likely be trailing often. And if Samir White is injured, and if Alexander Madison does not play as well, too, Amir Abdullah by default could walk into 8 to 10 PPR points just because the Raiders are trailing after the first quarter.
And don't forget, Dylan Laube could be activated. The past 6th-round draft pick, who's a pass catcher. They might have to, if they have to use Abdullah as an early down runner, you can't play him 50 snaps. I don't think you can. And so Laube could see some screens. Now, remember, the Broncos are an exceptional run defense. They're an exceptional pass defense. And the running backs are going to have to pass protect a lot in this game. Their floor plays. Like I said, yeah, Abdullah, like you said, you pick him up, 6 teams on bye. We all are desperate for running backs. He gets 3 targets and 5 carries. That could be enough for what you need on this barren week. Jacoby Myers, he somehow often gets it done, but man, I don't like this matchup. You got Surtain over here, you got Riley Moss over there. You're hoping for Jacoby Myers to get 4 catches for 45 yards. That's what you're hoping for. And I don't know how much of a ceiling is. I don't know how many points they're going to score. It's going to be a tough game. But of course, you're starting Brock Bowers. Brock Bowers is a Superman, but it gets done almost every week. So you're great there. But on the other side, look, I told, man, I knew people had to pick up Audric Estime because of the 2 week ago usage. But I was telling people on the Start Sit show, I go, I know you spend 80% of your fab. Enjoy your 4 fantasy points. That's what you're getting out of them. And I said, and there's no good way. And I can't predict Sean Payton, like you said. There's no way you can keep Javonte Williams out long term. I don't know what he was thinking, but when I thought it through, in that game where Estime played, they played the Chiefs. Yeah. And I think going back, what he wanted to do, he wanted to go power running against a very tough run defense, and he wanted to keep the game low scoring. In hindsight, that may have been it. It may have been a 1-game thing to try to beat the Chiefs, knowing they had little chance to do it. And then they go right back to Javonte because Javonte is an outstanding runner. He just has been in bad situations. And but again, he looked great again last week. But who knows? They might pull the rug on him again. I can't now we don't know. I started Javonte in my important leagues last week, saying you got to go back to him, but we'll see.
Yeah, I guess because we're running low on time, but Devon Vele, if you are in deeper leagues from a 6-team bye perspective, Vele's been getting a certain amount of floor production. There's zero ceiling, which is part of the frustrating thing with this. But with so many people on bye, like you might just have to be fine with a 6-point floor. Is Vele a guy that you think could exceed that kind of number, or is it just kind of built in that he's going to get the 3 check down throws for 30 yards every week?
I think it's the 3 for 30. Bo Nix's a point guard. Bo Nix has like 7 different guys he throws the ball to, except for Cortland Sutton, who gets the lion's share of the targets. Everybody else gets a few. And Vele's in the slot, so he gets real good looks for where he's a big slot too. And so he's definitely very reliable with those. There's always a chance for a touchdown. And that's where your upside is. But I don't think you see a 6-catch, 70-yard game coming, because there just aren't going to be the targets for it. They don't distribute the ball that way.
We have about 10 minutes left, which is a little bit frustrating because this final 4 game group of the week 12 slate is fantastic. And we'll start first, the Niners traveling to Lambeau Field. First time the Niners have played the Packers in Lambeau in like 10 years, it feels like. You might have a Brock Purdy injury. You might have a Nick Bosa injury. You might have a George Kittle injury as well, too. So right now, Packers favored by 2.5 in Lambeau. Disappointing win over the Bears, but it was a win nevertheless. Disappointing loss to the Seahawks for the 49ers last week, in which Geno Smith finally ran and had really, I thought, an excellent end-of-game drive. It was interesting to see. That was a divisional matchup. We just talked about earlier, divisional matchups get weird. I wasn't surprised the Seahawks covered. I was surprised they win. I am very nervous as a Packer fan because I have been haunted, demonized by Kyle Shanahan and these 49ers. I would love if my team could exact a little bit of revenge over all the turmoil and frustrating things that have been caused to me over the years. Something tells me that's not going to happen. I'm a little bit worried that it's going to be Christian McCaffrey going crazy and the Niners win and keep their playoff hopes alive. What's your thoughts on this matchup?
For what it's worth, I predict the Packers 24-23 on this one. McCaffrey does not look like himself. He's good. He's not Christian McCaffrey. The explosive plays aren't there. What used to be him breaking a run for 20, 30 yards is now getting to 6 or 7, and that's about it. Even as a receiver, the devastating yards after the catch aren't there. Is it still ramping up from injury? Maybe. Is it that this injury really sapped something from him? Probably. Deebo Samuel just can't run. He can't run like he is not the same player. George Kittle, as of recording Wednesday on early in the morning, he's supposed to play. But again, what is his capacity? The 49ers have a lot of bad vibes around them. They're not playing great. Their players don't look great. They're counting on Juwan Jennings to be their guy, and he's been very good for fantasy, and you keep starting him. But he has very big limitations. He's not a big play guy. Whereas the Packers, they do what they have to do offensively. Nick Bosa's probably out. He injured that oblique pretty good. Yeah. So that's going to help because they have very few pieces left. Charvarius Ward's been out about 3 games. They could use him back. I think the Packers are okay here. I think they move the ball. If Charvarius Ward starts, be nervous with Dobbs. I'd recommend not starting Dobbs last week against the Bears. If Charvarius Ward plays, I wouldn't play him, but I would play my other pieces. Jade Reed, I don't know what the heck they're doing with him. They can't figure out how to use him week to week.
Yeah, I wish it was more consistent. It feels like it's a platoon situation for Matt LaFleur, that he has scripted plays for Christian Watson and for Jaden Reed, and Dobbs is sort of like the third down Juwan, really kind of like the Niners thing that they do, where Dobbs is the one that Love will look to. But it's a positive thing, but it's not positive for fantasy. The positive that Matt LaFleur scripts so many things that Jordan Love really doesn't need to look for one target. This is not a Devontae Adams, Aaron Rodgers thing. The LaFleur offense now with Jordan Love runs more play by play, not player by player. And I think that'll be really interesting. I think the Charvarius Ward thing is really a really crucial key piece. If he does play, I would even just be worried about Christian Watson too. Like I could see Ward going in either one of those, depending on what sort of formation you see. And I think Ward would kind of erase either one of those options. Let's talk about the Cardinals and Seahawks, because we got a couple questions in the chat right now. We don't know the spread. I think per se the rain could be a factor. Jackson Smith-Njigba has had multiple good games now for the Seahawks. This has come with DK Metcalf now healthy. So is JSN getting to must-play territory for you?
He is. They're using him differently. Before, it was just kind of some check down stuff. Now they're actively engaging him on specific routes to attack defenses. It's a different usage set. And it works well for Geno Smith because the pass protection is so bad, and they use him on short and intermediate routes that are designed to get the ball out quicker for Geno. So yes, Jackson Smith and Jigba should be in the circle of trust. Now watch it go boom this week, but but there's that. So yes, that whole offense though, and I worried about this in the preseason. Their offensive coach comes over from college, Ryan Grubb. I said college coaches are not used to making adjustments. The league adjusted to him. That offense has not been the same. They get garbage time a lot of times, so they're fine with for fantasy. But that offense is not exploding anymore. You play your main guys on the team. You play Metcalf, Walker, Geno. You hope for garbage time because if it's not there, Geno does very little in the first 3 quarters of a lot of games. So there's that other side of the ball. Look, I don't know what the weather will be like, but Arizona, they're going to load a couple tight ends. Connor's going to have a day on the ground. It's a good matchup for him. They're using Harrison differently. They're getting him on more slants, which is good. They've had very few pass attempts in the last couple games, but he's going to do better coming out. He's a player to acquire right now. Kyler should get enough done in this one. I don't care about the rain. Wind is a problem. Rain is not.
Are you playing Marvin Harrison over like Bucky Irving, for example, if we're saying like high and flex plays? So Marvin Harrison or Bucky Irving?
I think there's enough score. It's going to be scoring. If there's a team the Cardinals can get a lead on, they might not throw. This game is not one where they probably have much of a commanding lead. They could, but they're not a commanding lead. They're going to have to throw. I'm going Marvin Harrison. They're using him way differently now.
Okay, and we talked about in the chat, the chat was asking about Anthony Richardson over Kyler Murray. We mentioned Anthony Richardson and his rushing opportunity against the Lions. There could be weather involved, but you're saying you'd rather play Kyler Murray because the rain's not concerned you, it's the wind.
No, and Murray can run too. So that's the thing. Murray can run. So I'm going to go with Murray here.
Okay. All right. Let's go to the Eagles Rams. 2 games yet left on the week 13 schedule. This one's in Los Angeles. Eagles favored by 2.5 on a fantastic win streak now, 8-2 on the season. Rams kind of need this one after having their dysfunction the past 2 weeks. I think you can pass on the Eagles defense, and the Rams really want to pass. But if you take away Kyron Williams, then the pass doesn't become an issue. So is it possible that the Eagles just once again trounce what has been the middle tier to low end tier of the NFC? It seems like they've been running through every single person in that sort of range this season.
So when the Rams have the ball, their pass protection has been a real problem, big problem. And this interior line of the Eagles is getting better every week. Jalen Carter's becoming a game wrecker. And Matthew Stafford, we've seen, look, Kupp and Nakua put up some numbers, but when teams can kind of gum up the middle of the field, they made it a problem for them. And they struggle once they're inside the 20-yard line, unless they get it on the goal when Kyron Williams can punch in. They're struggling there. This is not a good matchup. Cooper DeJean is playing very well in the slot. Mitchell, their outside corner.
Yeah.
Mitchell is playing extremely
Yes.
well. This is not a good matchup for the Rams. The Rams are in trouble here. This Eagles defense is legit right now, and they're going to put pressure on Stafford's looking like an old man a little bit. He's a great arm, but in terms of the pressure, you can see he's not that guy that kills pressure like he used to. Other side of the ball, the Eagles, look, the Rams have a nice defense. They have no shot against this offensive line. Though all those guys the young guys on that line, they're going to get steamrolled by this offensive line. Barkley's going to do fine. The corners are not going to be able to hang with A.J. Brown. Dallas Goedert has a great matchup. Devontae Smith's been the odd man out. He hasn't been getting a lot of targets. He's boom or bust.
I was going to say, is Devonta Smith, he's not in the Jalen Waddle territory, but you'd kind of like to not play Devonta Smith if you could help it. I don't know if you can, though, with 6 teams on bye. So Smith's still very much in you're playing him because you have to play him range.
Yeah, you have to play him. His floor is low, but yes, at a drop of that, he can get 100 yards and a touchdown because he does get open downfield. They will take some shots at him. It's unlike Jalen Waddle, who really has no ceiling at this point. Smith has a ceiling.
I'm really fascinated for this last game, so we'll spend a bit of time. But Ravens going to Los Angeles Chargers. This one, Monday Night Football, over-under at 50 points. Right now, Ravens favored by 3. You have revenge games galore. It's Greg Roman against the Ravens. We're talking about the coordinator as part of things. But J.K. Dobbins, Gus Edwards. I think you have the John Harbaugh thing. It's going to be fantastic. I don't think there's been more than 3 other quarterbacks in the NFL that have played as good over the past month and a half than Justin Herbert. He has been fantastic. I feel like everyone got awoken to that idea after what he did against the Bengals, but we've been seeing that more or less all season, at least after the first 3 weeks, and he's overcoming an injury. Herbert's been great. I don't know if they have the personnel receiver-wise to keep pace with the Ravens, because I think the Ravens are going to do fine offensively. What's your thoughts, though? Is this going to be another high-scoring game for the Chargers?
Yeah, I'm betting over 50 on this one. I love it. I think it can flirt with 60. And so the first thing is the Chargers want to run. They're not running on the Ravens. They've been an inefficient running attack. They broke a late run against Cincy. They didn't run well against them. You can't run on Baltimore unless you have an elite rushing attack. And the Chargers don't have that. What does that mean? They're going to have to throw. The Ravens cannot cover the pass. Doesn't matter who they play. They cannot stop the pass. So Herbert will find whoever he has to. It could be Disley. It could be McConkey. It could be Josh Palmer.
Johnston.
Quentin Johnson, it could be any of them. And that's the beauty of it. The beauty of it, Herbert's not leaning on any one player. Defenses can't key on any one player. Herbert's finding the defensive breakdown, and he's smashing it. So I don't know which receiver goes off, but Herbert is going to gash them. Other side of the ball, we saw it in the second half with the Chargers last week. Scheme is nice on defense, and you could beat bad teams at scheme. And they had a good half against the Bengals. But ultimately, talent is what makes the difference. And the Ravens coming off a real bad offensive showing against Pittsburgh, that's not happening here. And I don't see the Chargers scheme having any answers for Henry, Jackson, Flowers, Andrews. I don't see it. And Patrick Ricard doing the blocking and beating people up. I think this game sails up in the high scoring range.
From a running back perspective, would you play J.K. Dobbins again, revenge game against the Ravens? And I think that actually will matter to Dobbins quite a bit, and I think it matters to the Chargers. A couple weeks ago, they gave Hassan Haskins, former Titans guy, a 1-yard touchdown run against his team, the Titans, and has otherwise been really stinky. Like, I think the Chargers and Jim Harbaugh care about it a little bit. Would you play Dobbins over Tyrone Tracy, who's got a good match against the Buccaneers? Would you play Dobbins over like Bucky Irving, who we talked about earlier? Like, that's the sort of tier that I think Dobbins is in.
They're all so close. I would have no certainty saying one over the other. I would probably put Bucky Irving at the top of that group because he has the best matchup of them all. I would probably put Dobbins second because the volume he gets. Okay. I'd make him the number 2. Tracy, the Bucs have been better against the run than the pass, and he's boom or bust. So that I would not really. I'd put Tracy third though.
Okay, that's a fair question. Anything else that you want to talk about the Chargers Ravens yet?
No, I think we covered it for fair, but McConkey, look at it. You're playing McConkey because he now has a high floor. He's been really, really good. Quentin Johnson, he's living on touchdowns. So you be very careful with him, but there's a lot of coverage busts the Ravens have. This is the week to play him because everybody who can get deep on them does get deep on them. So if you're, your probability is in the range that he does have a big play here. Ravens wise, like I said, obviously you're starting all these guys anyway. Bateman's the tricky one because now when they're bringing more players and his targets are kind of like going down just a little bit. So just be careful with him, but it's 6 weeks on bye. You probably got to play him.
Yeah, I think Johnson actually is one that I'm very comfortable playing if you're doing those DFS pick'em entry stuff, taking the over on the receiving yards, over on 2.5 receptions, over on touchdown. This is going to be an interesting one. And I agree with you. A lot of offense involved. Longer show for us on the Wednesday show here, even though there's 6 teams on bye. I think there's a lot of important conversation to have. You could follow Jim Coventry at Jim Coventry NFL. You could follow me at JB Fantasy Sports on Twitter. Jim's got you covered on all the questions, start, sit stuff. And of course, you got you covered Sunday at 11 a.m. Eastern time on this very RotoWire YouTube network. He'll have the start sit stuff down there for you. Fantastic work as always, Jim. We don't thank you enough as the fantasy community for helping us as much as you do. Please tune into that show if you can on Sunday. And thanks everyone for listening to this one. We're back in next week.